The autumn wind howled through Bridger Canyon as evening shadows crept across the Montana wilderness. At exactly 6:47 p.m. on October 15, 2021, jogger Daniel Martinez rounded the bend on Bridger Canyon Road, his breathing steady, his mind focused on the rhythm of his feet against asphalt. What he saw next would haunt him for years. A silver Honda Civic sat abandoned in the middle of the road, engine purring, headlights piercing the gathering darkness like desperate fingers clawing into the void. The driver's door hung wide open, swaying gently in the mountain breeze. No driver, no explanation, just an empty car breathing exhaust into the cold Montana air. Martinez approached cautiously, his runner's high evaporating into dread. The interior light illuminated an overturned coffee cup, its contents soaking into beige upholstery. A psychology textbook lay open on the passenger seat, pages fluttering. But it was what he found on the asphalt that made his blood freeze. A smartphone, screen shattered like a spider's web, yet somehow still glowing with an unsent text message. Something's wrong. His trembling fingers dialed 911. There's an abandoned car on Bridger Canyon Road. He stammered into the phone, his voice barely audible over the wind. The door's open. There's blood on the ground. The dispatcher's calm questions felt surreal against the backdrop of this nightmare scene. Blood droplets, still wet, formed a trail that led to the canyon's edge before vanishing into darkness. Within minutes, the canyon filled with flashing red and blue lights. Deputy sheriff vehicles surrounded the Honda like protective sentinels, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wind, creating a barrier between the normal world and whatever horror had occurred here. The car's engine still ran, its headlights now joined by portable floodlights that turned night into harsh, artificial day. Detective Sarah Chun arrived at 7:23 p.m., her trained eyes immediately cataloging details others might miss. The positioning of the car suggested sudden braking. The driver's seat remained adjusted for someone approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall. Personal items scattered across the interior told a story of interrupted routine. Emma Rodriguez's student ID, her favorite lip gloss, a receipt from Starbucks timestamped just 2 hours earlier. The shattered phone yielded its secrets reluctantly. The last outgoing call had been to Emma's mother at 5:15 p.m., a brief conversation about weekend plans and Thanksgiving preparations. Her location services showed she'd driven straight from campus to this isolated stretch of road. But why? And where was Emma now? As crime scene photographers captured every angle, every drop of blood, every piece of evidence, none of them could imagine the magnitude of what they'd stumbled into. In exactly 72 hours, Emma Rodriguez would become the face that haunted every parent in Montana, her name whispered in dormitory hallways and family dinner conversations. But tonight, she was still just a missing person. Tonight, there was still hope. Emma Rodriguez embodied everything beautiful about Montana youth. At 23, she carried herself with the confident grace of someone who'd found her calling early. Her infectious laugh echoed through the corridors of Montana State University's psychology building, where professors and classmates alike gravitated toward her natural warmth and intellectual curiosity. Born and raised in Billings, Emma had chosen MSU for its renowned psychology program and its proximity to the mountains she'd loved since childhood. Her academic advisor, Dr. Patricia Wells, remembered Emma as exceptionally dedicated to her dream of becoming a child therapist. She had this remarkable ability to connect with people, Wells would later recall, tears streaming down her face. Emma saw pain in others and instinctively knew how to help. Her apartment near campus reflected her personality, walls covered with inspirational quotes, photographs from hiking adventures, and children's artwork from her volunteer work at the local animal shelter. Roommate Jessica Martinez described Emma's Sunday routine: early morning coffee, followed by challenging hikes in the Bridger Mountains, always returning with stories about the wildlife she'd encountered and the photos she'd captured. Emma's camera, a graduation gift from her parents, had become her constant companion. She'd recently discovered a passion for sunset photography, often driving to remote locations around Bozeman to capture the perfect shot of Montana's legendary Big Sky. Her Instagram account showcased breathtaking images of mountain silhouettes against burning orange horizons, each post garnering dozens of admirers who followed her adventures. Her parents, Linda and Tom Rodriguez, spoke to Emma every few days. Their last conversation, just hours before she vanished, had centered around Thanksgiving plans. "She was excited about bringing her new boyfriend home to meet us," Linda would later sob to investigators. She kept saying how perfect everything was, how blessed she felt. The irony would prove unbearable. Emma's social circle painted a picture of someone universally beloved. She never missed study groups, always remembered birthdays, and had a gift for making newcomers feel included. Her sorority sisters at Kappa Alpha Theta spoke of her leadership during Rush Week and her tireless fundraising efforts for local charities. Professor after professor described her as their most promising student. Bozeman itself seemed designed for someone like Emma. This college town of 50,000 nestled in the heart of the Rocky Mountains prided itself on safety and community spirit. Students routinely walked alone at night, left their bikes unlocked, and maintained an almost naive trust in their surroundings. Parents sent their daughters to MSU confident they'd chosen one of America's safest college environments. The city's crime statistics supported that confidence. Violent crime remained virtually non-existent, with most police reports involving minor theft or college party noise complaints. Local businesses stayed open late without concern, and the campus security force dealt primarily with locked-out students and minor vandalism. But beneath Bozeman's picture-perfect surface, something predatory was watching, waiting. Someone had noticed Emma's routines, her love of solitary photography expeditions, her trusting nature. While the community slept peacefully, confident in their collective safety, a hunter had already selected his prey. Friday, October 15th unfolded like any other day in Emma Rodriguez's carefully structured life. At 2 p.m., she settled into her usual third-row seat in developmental psychology, diligently taking notes as Professor Jenkins discussed childhood trauma therapy techniques. Classmates later remembered her enthusiastic participation in the discussion about therapeutic intervention strategies, a conversation that would prove tragically prophetic. By 4 p.m., Emma had joined her study group at Starbucks on Main Street. Security footage captured her laughing with friends, her psychology textbook opened beside her usual caramel macchiato. The timestamp on her receipt read 4:17 p.m., the last documented moment of Emma's normal life. She mentioned her plan to drive to Bridger Canyon for sunset photos, a hobby that had become her weekly ritual. At 5:15 p.m., Emma called her mother from her car, the conversation lasting exactly 6 minutes and 42 seconds according to phone records. They discussed Thanksgiving dinner preparations and Emma's excitement about introducing her boyfriend to the family. Linda Rodriguez would replay this conversation obsessively, searching for any hint of concern in her daughter's voice. There was none. The first 911 call came at 6:47 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., Bridger Canyon swarmed with emergency vehicles, their red and blue lights painting the mountain walls in urgent colors. Sheriff's deputies immediately cordoned off the scene, while Detective Sarah Chun began coordinating search efforts. The initial response followed standard missing person protocol, but Chin's instincts screamed that this was different. Search and rescue teams mobilized with military precision. Volunteers appeared as if summoned by some invisible call. Fellow students, local residents, members of Emma's sorority, professors who'd taught her. By dawn, over 300 people combed through dense forests surrounding the canyon, calling Emma's name until their voices grew hoarse. The sound of her name echoing through the wilderness became a haunting chorus of hope and desperation. Search dogs arrived Saturday morning, their handlers optimistic about quick success. The German shepherds immediately picked up Emma's scent from her abandoned car, but lost the trail within 50 yards, at the precise spot where the asphalt met canyon rock. It was as if Emma had simply evaporated into mountain air. Helicopter units joined the search, their rotors thundering over the canyon as pilots scanned for any sign of movement or disturbance. Thermal imaging revealed nothing unusual, no body heat signatures, no evidence of recent human activity in the wilderness below. Emma's cell phone, despite its shattered screen, provided no additional location data. Her social media accounts remained silent, her debit card unused. Detective Chun conducted her first press conference Saturday evening, her voice steady despite the growing dread in her chest. Emma Rodriguez is not the type of person to disappear voluntarily, she told assembled media. Something felt wrong immediately. We're treating this as a potential abduction case. The words hung in the cool mountain air like an ominous prophecy. Sunday brought the discovery that shattered all hope. A search volunteer, exploring a remote ravine 2 miles from the abandoned car, spotted clothing caught on jagged rocks 30 feet below the canyon rim. The Gallatin County coroner arrived by helicopter, confirming what everyone feared but none could voice. Emma Rodriguez's body had been found. The devastating moment of identification fell to her parents. Linda Rodriguez collapsed when shown her daughter's distinctive silver bracelet, the one Emma never removed. Tom Rodriguez's anguished cry echoed through the coroner's office, a sound that would haunt everyone present for years to come. News of Emma Rodriguez's murder rippled through Bozeman like shockwaves from an earthquake, shattering the community's carefully constructed sense of security. By Monday morning, parents throughout Montana were calling their daughters at colleges across the state, voices tight with newfound anxiety. Montana State University's administration fielded hundreds of calls from terrified families demanding answers to questions nobody could yet provide. The campus transformed overnight from a place of learning and growth into a fortress of fear. Emergency blue light stations, previously decorative afterthoughts, suddenly became crucial landmarks in students' mental maps. Campus security increased patrols, their golf carts replaced by marked vehicles with flashing lights. The carefree atmosphere that had defined MSU for decades evaporated like morning mist. Local businesses responded with swift, decisive action. Hardware stores sold out of deadbolts and security cameras within days. The bookstore began stocking personal alarms and pepper spray. Coffee shops that had welcomed solo studying suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. Even longtime residents found themselves locking doors they'd left open for years. Emma's sorority sisters gathered at the Kappa Alpha Theta house, transforming their chapter room into an impromptu memorial. Photographs of Emma covered every surface, laughing at rush events, hiking in the mountains, volunteering at the animal shelter. The sisters took turns sharing memories, their voices breaking as they struggled to understand how their friend had become a victim of such incomprehensible violence. A candlelight vigil 3 days after the murder drew over 2,000 people to the MSU campus quad. The sea of flickering flames created an ethereal glow against the darkened mountains, while Emma's photograph, enlarged to poster size, gazed down from the makeshift memorial stage. Her parents stood beside the podium, Linda Rodriguez's tear-streaked face illuminated by candlelight as she struggled to thank the community for their support. Detective Sarah Chun watched from the crowd's periphery, her trained eyes scanning faces for anything unusual, any sign of someone who didn't belong. 15 years of law enforcement experience had taught her that killers sometimes attended their victims' vigils, drawn by some twisted need to witness the grief they'd caused. But that night, she saw only genuine sorrow and communal fear. Chen's obsession with the case had already begun consuming her life. Her colleagues found her office at all hours, walls increasingly covered with crime scene photographs, timeline charts, and suspect profiles. The brutality of Emma's murder haunted her, the careful disposal of evidence, the killer's apparent knowledge of forensic procedures, the precision that suggested this wasn't a first offense. The detective's personal connection to the case ran deeper than professional obligation. Her own daughter, Lily, was Emma's age, also a college student with dreams of helping others. Chin saw Emma's face in her daughter's features, heard Emma's voice in Lily's phone calls home. The parallel was too close, too painful to ignore. Her husband, David, watched helplessly as his wife worked 16-hour days, bringing case files home, spreading crime scene photos across their dining room table. "You can't save them all," he whispered during one of their increasingly rare conversations. But Chin wouldn't let go, of the promise she'd made at Emma's funeral. Standing beside Emma's casket at Sunset Hills Cemetery, surrounded by hundreds of mourners, Chin had spoken words that would define the next 3 years of her life. "I won't rest until we find who did this." The weight of that promise pressed down on her shoulders like mountain snow, heavy and relentless. The investigation into Emma Rodriguez's murder became Detective Sarah Chin's white whale, consuming her thoughts, her time, and gradually, her faith in justice. Each promising lead crumbled under scrutiny, each potential breakthrough dissolved into disappointment. leaving behind only frustration and the growing certainty that Emma's killer was still out there, watching, perhaps planning to strike again. The initial evidence collection had been compromised by Montana's unpredictable weather. Rain began falling just hours after Emma's body was discovered, washing away potential DNA evidence from the crime scene. The killer had chosen his location well, remote, rocky terrain that preserved few useful impressions. Even experienced crime scene technicians admitted they'd rarely encountered such challenging conditions. Security camera footage from the canyon area proved equally frustrating. Of the 3 traffic cameras positioned along possible escape routes, 2 had mysteriously malfunctioned on October 15th, displaying only static during the critical hours. The 3rd camera, positioned too far from the crime scene to capture useful details, showed dozens of vehicles passing during Emma's estimated time of death. Each vehicle required investigation. Each driver needed questioning. Chin methodically worked through Emma's social connections, starting with those closest to her. Emma's boyfriend, Jake Morrison, became the initial focus. His alibi, attending a study group in the MSU library, was verified through security footage and witness statements. DNA samples cleared him definitively. Emma's ex-boyfriend from high school, now living in Denver, had similar ironclad documentation of his whereabouts. The detective expanded her investigation to include campus maintenance workers, delivery personnel, and anyone with access to student information. Each interview followed the same pattern: initial suspicion, careful questioning, alibi verification, DNA collection, eventual elimination. The process was exhausting and demoralizing, but Chin refused to cut corners or rush the investigation. Witness reports of suspicious vehicles near Bridger Canyon led to dozens of wild goose chases. A white pickup truck spotted by 3 different hikers turned out to belong to a local rancher checking fence lines. A dark sedan seen parked near the canyon belonged to a photography enthusiast capturing the same sunset Emma had sought. Each lead consumed days of investigative work before reaching the same dead end. The psychological toll on Emma's family was devastating to witness. Linda Rodriguez developed severe anxiety that prevented her from driving past Bridger Canyon, the route she'd taken to work for 15 years. She started attending therapy sessions, struggling to understand how her daughter's promising life had been cut short by senseless violence. Sleep became elusive, interrupted by nightmares of Emma calling for help. Tom Rodriguez channeled his grief into obsessive research, spending hours on online crime forums, convinced the killer was still active somewhere. He created detailed spreadsheets tracking unsolved murders across the Mountain West, looking for patterns that might lead to Emma's killer. His dining room became a makeshift investigation center, filled with printed articles and hand-drawn timelines. The case began affecting Chin's own family dynamics. Her daughter Lily, now afraid to walk alone on her college campus, called home multiple times daily. Her husband David watched his wife's transformation from dedicated detective to haunted investigator with growing concern. Family dinners became silent affairs, Chin's mind clearly elsewhere, replaying evidence and reimagining scenarios. By 2023, the case had generated over 3,000 pages of reports, hundreds of witness interviews, and dozens of DNA samples from potential suspects. Chin's office walls resembled a serial killer's lair, covered with photographs, maps, and connecting strings that traced potential relationships between evidence points. Her colleagues worried about her mental health, but none questioned her dedication. The devastating moment arrived in January 2024. After 3 years of intensive investigation, the department officially designated Emma's case as cold. Chin stood in the evidence room, tears streaming down her face as she packed crime scene photos into storage boxes. The weight of failure crushed her shoulders as she sealed each box, knowing that Emma's killer remained free. January 15, 2025, began like any other Tuesday in Detective Sarah Chin's life. Promoted to lieutenant but still haunted by Emma Rodriguez's unsolved murder, she was reviewing budget reports when her desk phone rang at 9:23 a.m. The caller was Dr. Rebecca Martinez from the Montana State Crime Lab, her voice barely containing excitement. "Sarah, you need to get down here immediately. We have a hit on the Rodriguez case." Chin's coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering against the floor as 3 years of buried hope suddenly surged back to life. She was in her car within minutes, racing through Bozeman's morning traffic toward the crime lab facility on the university campus. Advanced genetic genealogy technology had finally arrived in Montana, bringing with it the power to identify suspects through distant DNA relatives. The process, previously available only to large metropolitan departments, used cutting-edge analysis to build family trees from minimal genetic evidence. Emma's case had been selected as one of the first to benefit from this breakthrough technology. Dr. Martinez led Chun into the genetics laboratory, where computer screens displayed complex family trees spanning multiple generations. We uploaded the DNA sample from Emma's case into the genealogy database 3 months ago, Martinez explained, pointing to branching connections between names and dates. Yesterday, the system identified a potential suspect through a third cousin who'd submitted DNA for ancestry research. The name on the screen made Chin's hands tremble. Marcus Webb, age 34, last known address in Wyoming. The preliminary background check revealed a criminal history that sent chills down her spine. Multiple arrests for violence against women, restraining orders from former girlfriends, and a pattern of employment that involved traveling between construction sites across the Mountain West. Chin's excitement grew as she studied Webb's timeline. Construction company records showed he'd worked on MSU campus renovations during September and October 2021, specifically on the psychology building where Emma attended classes. His employment had ended abruptly on October 18th, just 3 days after Emma's murder, when he'd failed to report for work without explanation. The detective spent the next 48 hours coordinating with multiple law enforcement agencies to locate Webb. His trail had gone cold after leaving Montana. He'd used false names, worked for cash, and avoided permanent addresses. But genetic genealogy had provided the breakthrough they needed. Now traditional detective work would complete the puzzle. Webb was finally located in rural Wyoming, living in a dilapidated trailer under the assumed name Michael Warren. Surveillance revealed a paranoid man who rarely left his property, kept unusual hours, and appeared to be monitoring police scanner frequencies. His behavior suggested someone with experience avoiding law enforcement detection. The most chilling discovery came from analyzing Webb's work schedule against Emma's daily routines. Construction records showed he'd had access to student information through his renovation work in the psychology building. Security footage from campus revealed him lingering in hallways during class changes, his eyes following female students with predatory interest. Chun assembled a task force including FBI agents, given Webb's interstate movements and the potential for additional victims. The investigation revealed his method, using construction work to gain access to college campuses, studying student routines, and identifying potential victims. Emma fit his preferred profile, attractive, trusting, with predictable habits that made her vulnerable. The forensic team's excitement was palpable as they connected evidence points. Webb's truck, eventually located in a Wyoming salvage yard, contained traces of Emma's DNA despite his attempts at cleaning. His former apartment in Bozeman, searched with a warrant, yielded disturbing evidence of surveillance equipment and detailed notes about several MSU students. The revelation that shattered any remaining doubts came from Webb's personal effects, a notebook containing detailed observations about Emma's movements, her class schedule, her photography hobby, and most chilling of all, hand-drawn maps of Bridger Canyon with multiple locations marked as possibilities. He had been watching Emma for weeks, planning her murder with methodical precision. March 15, 2025, dawned crisp and clear across the Wyoming High Plains as FBI agents and local sheriff's deputies took positions around Marcus Webb's isolated trailer. At exactly 6 a.m., the arrest team moved with coordinated precision, their vehicles forming a perimeter that left no escape route. Inside the rusted trailer, Webb jolted awake to the sound of amplified voices demanding his surrender. The manhunt that had consumed 3.5 years was ending not with dramatic shootouts or high-speed chases, but with the pathetic figure of Webb stumbling from his trailer in stained underwear, hands raised in trembling surrender. His appearance had deteriorated dramatically, gaunt face covered by an unkempt beard, hollow eyes darting frantically as he processed the inevitable end of his freedom. Inside the trailer, investigators discovered a shrine to obsession that defied belief. Every surface was covered with newspaper clippings about Emma's murder, printed photographs from her social media accounts, and handwritten notes detailing her daily routines with disturbing precision. Maps of Bozeman covered one wall, with Emma's apartment, her favorite coffee shop, and the psychology building marked in red ink. The most chilling discovery was Webb's journal, filled with detailed observations about Emma's movements written in cramped handwriting that betrayed his deteriorating mental state. Entries dated weeks before her murder revealed the depth of his stalking. Subject leaves coffee shop, 4:20 p.m. Tuesday/Thursday. Always orders caramel macchiato. Sits third table from window. Laughs too much. The clinical detachment of his surveillance notes contrasted grotesquely with the violence of Emma's death. Detective Chun watched Webb's transport to the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office via video link, her heart pounding as the man who'd haunted her dreams for years was finally brought to justice. The interrogation room had been prepared meticulously, recording equipment tested, legal observers in place, and Chun positioned behind one-way glass to witness the moment she'd worked toward for 3.5 years. Webb's initial denials crumbled within hours. Confronted with DNA evidence, construction records placing him on campus during Emma's murder, and the overwhelming evidence found in his trailer, his elaborate lies became increasingly desperate. His court-appointed attorney advised silence, but Webb seemed compelled to justify his actions, as if explaining his twisted logic might somehow make sense of the incomprehensible. The confession, when it finally came, lasted 4 hours and 27 minutes. Webb described following Emma to Bridger Canyon, watching her set up her camera equipment for sunset photographs. He admitted approaching her under the pretense of asking for directions, then attacking when she became suspicious of his behavior. His account of Emma's final moments revealed she had fought courageously, scratching his arms and screaming for help that would never come. Webb's description of disposing evidence showed the careful planning that had frustrated investigators for years. He'd studied forensic procedures through online courses and true crime documentaries, learning how to minimize DNA traces and eliminate fingerprints. His methodical cleanup of the crime scene had been designed to create exactly the kind of investigative nightmare that had plagued Chen's team. The most heartbreaking moment came when Webb admitted he'd kept Emma's camera, the graduation gift from her parents that had represented her artistic dreams. He'd thrown it into a remote canyon in Wyoming, claiming he couldn't bear to look at the photographs of Montana sunsets that had drawn Emma to Bridger Canyon on the night she died. Standing before Judge Patricia Williams for sentencing, Webb appeared diminished and pathetic, a sharp contrast to the monster he'd become in Chen's imagination. When asked if he had anything to say to Emma's family, he mumbled a barely audible apology that satisfied no one. Judge Williams' words echoed through the packed courthouse. "Marcus Webb, you have terrorized an entire community, destroyed a family, and robbed the world of a promising young woman. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Emma's parents watched from the gallery as Webb was led away in shackles, their faces showing not satisfaction, but the exhausted relief of people who'd carried an unbearable burden for too long. Justice had finally been served, but it could never bring back their daughter. For years after Emma Rodriguez's murder shattered Bozeman's sense of security, the community has begun the slow, painful process of healing. The scars remain visible. Security cameras still monitor areas that once felt perfectly safe. Parents still worry when their daughters venture out alone, and Emma's name continues to echo through conversations about campus safety and violence against women. Montana State University transformed its tragedy into meaningful change through the Emma Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship, established in partnership with the psychology department. Each year, the scholarship supports students pursuing careers in trauma therapy and victim advocacy, ensuring Emma's dream of helping others continues through new generations of mental health professionals. The selection committee includes Emma's parents, who find purpose in reading applications from students inspired by her story. The Rodriguez family channeled their grief into advocacy through the Emma Rodriguez Foundation for Missing Persons, a nonprofit organization that assists families navigating the nightmare of having a loved one disappear. Tom Rodriguez, who once obsessively searched online crime forums for clues to his daughter's murder, now uses that same energy to coordinate search efforts and provide emotional support to other families facing similar tragedies. Linda Rodriguez speaks regularly at college campuses across Montana about personal safety and the importance of trusting instincts. Her message, delivered with the quiet strength of someone who survived unimaginable loss, resonates powerfully with young women who see their own mothers in her tear-filled eyes. Emma was careful, she tells audiences. But careful wasn't enough. We must create communities where women are protected, not just expected to protect themselves. Detective Sarah Chin's promotion to head Montana's newly formed cold case unit represents both professional recognition and personal redemption. Her obsessive dedication to Emma's case, once viewed as potentially unhealthy by colleagues, now serves as the foundation for investigating dozens of unsolved murders throughout the state. Chin's office walls, once covered with Emma's case materials, now display photographs of multiple victims whose families deserve the same relentless pursuit of justice. Emma's roommate, Jessica Martinez, completed her psychology degree and now works as a therapist specializing in trauma recovery. She credits Emma's memory with guiding her career choice, often telling clients about her friend's belief that healing comes through human connection and understanding. The apartment they shared has become a gathering place for Emma's former classmates, who meet monthly to maintain the bonds forged through shared grief. The campus itself bears subtle memorials to Emma's legacy. A bench near the psychology building where she spent countless hours studying carries a small bronze plaque with her favorite quote about the power of empathy. Students often stop there between classes, some aware of its significance, others simply drawn to the peaceful spot overlooking the mountains Emma loved. Bridger Canyon has reclaimed its natural beauty, though visitors sometimes pause at the spot where Emma's car was found, leaving flowers or small stones in remembrance. The canyon walls that witnessed such horror can now stand as silent sentinels protecting Emma's memory, their ancient presence putting human tragedy into perspective while honoring the young woman whose dreams ended there. Perhaps the most meaningful tribute comes from strangers who never knew Emma but were touched by her story. Fresh flowers appear weekly at her gravesite in Sunset Hills Cemetery, placed by people who recognize in her death the fragility of all innocent dreams. Her headstone, etched with mountain silhouettes she photographed, has become a pilgrimage site for those seeking to understand how communities heal from unspeakable loss. As afternoon sunlight filters through the canyon where Emma took her final photographs, the landscape appears unchanged by human tragedy. The mountains that witnessed her murder continue their eternal watch over Montana's Big Sky country, indifferent to human suffering, yet somehow comforting in their permanence. Emma Rodriguez's voice may have been silenced, but her impact on Montana will echo forever. In the lives she saves through increased awareness, the family she helps through her parents' foundation, and the community that learned to transform tragedy into meaningful change. The story ends not with the satisfaction of justice served, but with the recognition that healing requires more than punishment. It demands that we honor victims by creating the safer world they deserve to inhabit.